I'd like you to tell me what are your thoughts on racism and specifically how it pertains to law enforcement. I mean, I know that you're going to have bad apples in any career field, and you've probably got some cops who are racist, but by and large, if you've been in this industry, if you will, for 25 years, what have you seen when it comes to race and how people treat each other, how people treat police officers, and how police officers treat civilians when it comes to their race?
Well, I'll draw one comparison. I'm a woman in law enforcement. I've not had a lot of bad experiences being a woman in law enforcement, but I have had some. And most of the time, I can walk into a group of men in law enforcement and be treated equally. Mm-hmm. But I can also walk into a room of men in law enforcement, and there are times that I can feel the mood change. And I can usually pick out, if I've been in the room for a little while, the one or two. They're far and few between, but the one or two men that are not so happy that I'm there. And they'll be the ones that'll be very dismissive when I participate in conversations, aren't interested in what I have to say. And I can pick up on that, and I've gotten over the years very good at that, at picking that out. So if there are men in law enforcement that still don't feel like women belong, and I've had a few flat out tell me I don't belong, then I would venture to guess that there are probably some law enforcement officers that feel like, that they have some biases towards Hispanics or blacks, Asians. I'm sure that it does exist. I will tell you that here in Maine, the time that I've been in law enforcement, I personally have not seen it. I've not heard it. I haven't had any officer that I've ever worked with be prejudiced or biased towards someone of color, either being an officer, or nor have they treated anybody of color or another race. They've not treated them any differently. If we've encountered them on the road or been arresting them, they're treated just like they would treat anyone else. But I'm sure that under the surface, some people probably have some feelings towards them. I know for myself, I have always been very sensitive to minorities, just because in some ways I'm a minority in my job. So I've always been sensitive to minorities. I've always, if anything, spent a little more time with and giving them just a little extra attention. And by that I mean just being maybe a little bit more understanding, taking a little bit more time to hear what they're trying to tell me, just to make sure that they don't feel like they're being treated differently. So...
Do you ever feel like there are certain races that treat police officers differently? Or maybe they have a wall up already because they feel negatively about police officers?
I can say I've not run into this with, and just speaking very frankly, and honestly and openly, I've not run into any Asians or Hispanics that have ever treated me any differently. I have run into black people that have, and I've always been able to have those encounters end on a positive note, but I have had them, if I've approached them, so that, let's say that they're doing something of concern like any other person, like a white person, that I would approach them in the same exact manner. I have had them become very defensive and mention that I was only approaching them because they were black, or words to that effect, or that I was harassing them because they were black, or I was lying and making something up because they were black. I have had that happen on more than one occasion, and To me, it's upsetting. One, because it wasn't happening, and two, because, I didn't understand, why they would immediately become that defensive. But I would let them talk and ask them why they felt that way, and then I would explain to them why I did what I did, and why I approached their car the way I did, and why I stopped them for that. And every single time, it's ended up being a positive encounter.
Can you give me, I don't know, can you give me an example of that? Is that legal?
Yeah,
Share that?
Yeah, I can. I'll tell you about the last one that comes to mind. Sometimes, when I'm training new officers, I will give them certain types of cars or certain situations to look for, because I know we're going to see a lot of them, because I know that we can get a lot of traffic stops in. So it's perfectly legal to stop cars for these things. It's not something we normally stop cars for, but it gives them a lot of practice to stop cars. So in this last particular instance, I told the young officer that was training to look for the limo tent windows, the blacked out windows, because in Maine it's illegal. Because I know that they can get 5 or 10 of those stopped. We don't write tickets for them. It's a good practice for the officer. So we stopped this vehicle for blacked out windows, which they're not supposed to have. Not a big deal. We're not going to write a ticket.
So wait 1 second, just so I understand.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that you've picked out a violation,
Mm-hmm.
and
Illegal violation.
you already know that you're letting your new officer stop people to get practice stopping people.
Mm-hmm.
And you also already know that you're not intending to write tickets
Right.
for this violation.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So the first vehicle we stop, blacked out windows, turn around on the vehicle. I tell the new officer, I'll approach the car and speak to the driver so you can see how it's done. And then after you get comfortable, then we'll let you start talking to the people. So I approach the car, have the officer stand back, the new officer, and the driver. Remember, the windows are limo tent, we can't see in. Driver rolls down his windows, and when he gets his windows rolled down, I see now that I have about a 30-year-old black male. And he immediately starts in yelling that this is nothing but harassment. We're doing this to harass him because he's black, and it kind of goes from there. So I let him kind of run out of steam, say what all he wants to say, and then I ask him if he would now let me explain to him why we stopped him. And he says sure, and he's still hot. He's still convinced that we're, two white people, officers, harassing him. So I decide that I'm going to go one step further and not tell him that we're stopping him for the windows. I decide I'm going to go one step further and just tell him the whole story behind why we're stopping him. So I tell him, hey, this young man here is a new officer. He's, 21 years old. He's learning how to be a policeman. I'm trying to get him some practice on stopping cars, and I told him this is the violation we're going to stop for the night. You have black windows, they're blacked out, tinted. We couldn't even see in the car when we stopped. You roll your windows down and you verbally accost us. We didn't even know that we had a black man in the car, and all I wanted to do was get him some practice. And this is the first car he's ever stopped, and this is, I think at that point he started to realize that he kind of embarrassed himself. And I said, can you do me a favor and just help me train him and walk through the steps of this traffic stop so he can see what all he's going to have to do to keep himself safe? And can you answer all the questions? And then he started to feel like he was helping me with the traffic stop, so he was really embarrassed when the whole thing was all over. He said, sure, ma'am, I'll help you. Yes, ma'am, yes, officer. And so he helped me. He gave me all the paperwork I asked for, and I let him know right off so he would calm down that he wasn't getting a summons. And so afterwards, and I gave him everything back, he said, you know what, I have to apologize. I don't know why I acted like that. And we talked for a few minutes about, black people being stopped by the police, and we just had a really good conversation on the side of the road. And when he left, he said, I will never come at the police like that again. I will wait and hear what they have to say. You've taught me something. And that's what I was saying earlier about, that's what I love about law enforcement, that at the end of an encounter, if we can just understand each other a little better, you know. He saw me at the end of that encounter as another human being, just another person, and he saw that young officer as a young 21-year-old kid that just wanted to be a policeman. And I was trying to teach him to be safe. And I saw him as just, you know, a young black man that was scared. And he told me why he was scared. You know, we had a little conversation about that. And that's why I like being a police officer. And so, yes, sometimes black people do become very defensive. And I would say for no reason, but, you know, I don't know how they've been treated by police officers prior to coming in contact with me. So they probably have another story about someone that was prejudiced, that didn't treat them right. You know, just like my story.
Right. Yeah, that goes back to you saying
Yeah.
it stands to reason that if people don't want women, then there's going to be a few that obviously have some other prejudices as well.
Mm-hmm.